I welcome you guys back to my next course, which is how to ignore in life. I need you to understand that when you're ignoring something in life, I need you to understand that it's really that you ignore the negativity in life. I need you to understand you go away from the negativity and you ignore the people who never help you. I mean, you ignore people that are bad with you and are negative with you, and you ignore the drama, you ignore the Netflix, you ignore the drugs, you ignore people who have no value. You ignore anything that's unsuccessful in life, and that way you're going to understand you go to the better place. Because when you ignore something, it's really that you're disciplining yourself to understand that you're going to stay away from it. So I ignore the drugs because I never go there. I ignore negative people because I never go there. I ignore anything on television because there's nothing on. Or else that normal television is just normal television. I go watch extraordinary television, which is self-education today. And that's going to help me today. So I never ignore people who are successful, I ignore people who are unsuccessful. Do you understand? So that's a discipline. You have to understand that what you ignore today is a discipline. So ignorance is a big part of life, and you understand that you have to be a more disciplined person in order to ignore more. I say no to most of life because I ignore most of life. I ignore most of life so I can focus on what's more important. Do you understand? So what is more important for me? I ignore people who are, let's say, criminal-minded and people who are going to jail. I ignore those people. I never go there. I ignore them. I never reply to them. I never contact them because they're wasting my time. I go and ignore people who waste my time. I never talk to people who waste my time. I never talk to people who never find me attractive. I never talk to people who reject me. I ignore people who reject me. I ignore people who hate me. I ignore anything that doesn't help me. I realize that is all self-discipline. I mean, what I just described is over 1,000 disciplines. So you understand that I ignore meat. I ignore meat because I never go there. I just never go there because I've learned something about it. I realize that when I've learned something about it, I still keep learning. I still keep learning, although I know nothing. I know nothing. I make sure to ignore the I know remark because I know nothing. I know nothing in life. I make sure to keep myself open. I make sure to keep myself open-minded. So I ignore people who are very slow in life. I ignore them because they're going to slow me down. Do you understand? So I ignore people who have no speed and have no effectiveness and have no leadership in life. I ignore them. I ignore them. I just never go to them. I never go where they are. I ignore people who never public speak, for example. I love to go and talk to people who public speak because those people are my role models in life. I go where they are because they can teach me some public speaking skills. I'll go where the skills are. So in order for myself to understand, I have to ignore people who never do as good as me. You understand? So I ignore people who are less skilled than me. I ignore people who have no habits like I do. I ignore people who are never as good as I am. I go to where the people who are better than me are. I ignore people who are less successful than me. I ignore people who look worse than me in life. I ignore people who are really, let's say, ugly in life. I ignore ugly people in life. I never go to where the rude people are as well. I ignore rude people. I ignore hospitals. I never go to hospitals. I ignore hospitals. I ignore fishing. I never go fishing. I ignore fishing. I ignore fishing. I make sure to understand that in my journal I say what you never do. So I ignore most of life in my journal and I say what I never do in life. I make sure I ignore restaurants. I never go to restaurants. I never go there. I realize that restaurants never help me in life. I realize that I just go cook for myself and I never even cook for myself. I ignore cooking. I ignore refrigerators. I ignore curtains. I ignore real estate. I'll never ever purchase real estate. I'll never ever be the person who makes cash flow with real estate. I don't care about that. You have to understand what I care about is Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ says that Jesus Christ will never make money on real estate either. And do you understand? So it's not about making money with real estate. You have to understand to go do what Jesus will do today. You have to understand that way you use Jesus as the anchor. You understand that Jesus is the common line in between the world. You understand that you have to go and follow that line that Jesus is doing. I realize that when I ignore people, I ignore anybody who has worse habits than me. I ignore them because they've got no value for me. I realize that when I look at people, I look at their habits first. I look at the habits. I look at their Instagram, I see their habits straight away. When I see their Instagram, I see the habits right away. I see how successful they are. I realize that you can never hide from me and how successful you are today. Do you understand? So realize that I ignore the people who are unsuccessful. I ignore the people who are lacking in some kind of way that can never help me. I ignore unkind people. I ignore people who never help me at all. So I just go the way of the better way, which is I make sure to ignore nothingness and I ignore pleasure. I ignore pleasure because that way I'm a person who delays gratification. Do you understand? So I ignore technology that never helps me. I ignore the Ferrari. I don't care about the Ferrari. I care about the speaker more than the Ferrari because the speaker is going to help me to give you some information. Whereas the Ferrari is just some seeking pleasure stuff. Whereas the Ferrari is not going to help you for anything. I don't know what the Ferrari is going to help you. I'd rather have a limo. I'd rather have a limo than a Ferrari. I'd rather be looked upon in a limo than a Ferrari. Do you understand? You have to understand, when you stay away from expenditures, I realize that's something that in terms of life that's not helping you and is taking away your money. I ignore that. I ignore what takes my money away. I ignore people who are cigarette smokers, for example. I ignore them. I never need to be around them when they're smoking cigarettes. I realize that when they're smoking cigarettes, I realize that I have to smell their toxins. I realize that they're never taking care of myself. I realize they're never taking care of me. You understand? So I ignore people who never take care of me. You understand? I go to where people are taking care of me in terms of ideas. I realize that I go and surround myself with people who love me more. So when I see a cigarette smoker around me, I say, get lost. I say, get lost straight away, because guess what? That person's smoking in front of me. I realize they're going to smoke in front of your kids too. I mean, they're going to kill your kids. I mean, when you're living with a smoker, I lived with a smoker for 26 years, which is my biological dad. You have to realize, I ignored him now. I ignore him so much, because guess what? Each and every day, he's smoking around the house. And I always have to smell the couch and it's so full of cigarettes. Do you understand? And I realize that's the worst when you're around a smoker. I'm very ignorant in life, although you understand that I'm very ignorant about the unsuccessful matters that is never helping me. I realize that I go to what helps me only. I'm only going where I'm helped in life. I'm only making sure that I'm more of who I am. So I'm only ignorant when it makes common sense. I have to be careful with my words over here, because in order for me to really communicate something, I have to do much better than yesterday. So make sure that no matter what, you're communicating the I am statements in a way that's going to make common sense all the time. You have to understand that I ignore doing tiles and making tunnels. I don't care about that. I don't care about making tunnels. I don't care about construction sites. I ignore the construction sites. I ignore going around construction sites. I ignore loud places. I ignore the pubs. I ignore the bars. I ignore the casino. I don't care about that. I ignore poker. I ignore dogs. I ignore cats. I ignore having pets in my life. I realize I ignore having pets in my life. Do you understand? So you understand that I never have to take care of pets anymore. Do you understand? Because I'm a vegan. I don't care about pets. I don't care about dogs. I'm a vegan though. You understand? I'm a vegan. I don't care about fishes. I'm a vegan though. I never eat them. I don't care about fishes. I don't care about mammals. I don't care about all these animals. I don't care about them. I just stay away from them. I realize when I have to see them, I'll go. Although I ignore the zoos. I ignore Taronga Zoo. I ignore going to the zoo and the aquariums. I never go there in my life. I'll go to the African safari. I'll go see lions. I'll go see wild animals. I'll go there because that's more interesting than a zoo. I'd rather see a tiger with a pack of tigers in Africa rather than a zoo. Do you understand that? Because when I go to the zoo, I promote them having a zoo. I don't care about the zoo in life. I stay away from most of aspects of life, so this is how to ignore. So when I ignore, I make sure I ignore receipts. I don't care about receipts in life. Whereas when you go to the checkout and they give you a receipt, I ignore the receipt because guess what? I have a credit card, which is a debit card, and once I pay pass, I then get the receipt already. I don't know why they're giving receipts. When you pay pass something, you get the receipt already. Do you understand? So you have to always look smarter. So I ignore people who never look smart. I ignore people who are materialistic in nature. I ignore them. I just never go where they are because they're going to give me some of that. I never care about being materialistic. I realize that I'm just renting materials. I'm renting this microphone. I'm renting what I have today. You understand? So you have to understand, I ignore the 9 to 5 job. I ignore it totally. I never go there. I realized that when people ask me why, it's because I'm more successful, that's why. I realized that the 9-to-5 job will never help me at all. I realized it will never help me with money and anything in life. I realized it's really taking my time. I realized that I'm always away from the 9-to-5 job. You understand that I was a person who worked a 9-to-5 job, I worked a forklift job, I worked in van driving. I now do public speaking work, I do life coaching. I realized that I'm much better than a 9-to-5 job. I'm doing much better now. Do you understand? So how am I doing much better? I ignore people who are negative. I ignore the crowd. I ignore where the crowd are. I realize that when the crowd's walking in the shops and everything, I'm the one pumping music around the shops. Do you understand? Because everybody in the crowd is watching me. I realize everybody in the crowd is watching me now. I realize I'm never a part of the crowd anymore. I realize now I'm somebody in the crowd. Do you understand? So when you're walking with 100 people and it's all silent, I need you to be the one who's pumping music. Do you understand? Because that way you're going to be unique. I realize that when I ignore something, I ignore anything that's negative. I ignore anything that's ignorant of me. I ignore them. I ignore them totally. Do you understand? Because I'm more important than them. I ignore anything that's never going to help me to arise in a better way. I'm rich or better. I ignore anything that's hatred. I realize I ignore my ego. I ignore anything that's unhelpful. I make sure that when I live my life much better, I do my videos and I do them in a way where I ignore to go around cars and construction sites because I have audio recording. I realize that when something's going tuk 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 and you're trying to speak and you're actually speaking and there's a tuk 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 in the background, I realize I go and ignore that sound. So I make sure I go do my videos where that sound is never going to be in my videos. I ignore that. I realize that's what you never do. I realize that I make these full lists of what I never do in my journal. I realize that I have to think off the top of my head. I'm never thinking about anything, although you have to understand that I have to see what else I ignore because I already wrote it down. I already wrote everything down, although I ignore to never ever track my finances. I make sure to always track my finances. I always make sure that I'm doing something positive. I ignore to never read. I have to read all the time. I have to make sure I have to read something. So I ignore people who never read in life because I already see how successful they are. I mean, they never read a book, or else they know it all in life. I stay away from those people. I ignore them. Do you understand? Because it's common sense to ignore people who are less successful. I never go around the people who are never leadership quality. I never go around them. Do you understand? So I'm always around successful people. I ignore those people who are never leadership quality. I'm rich or better. I make sure no matter what, I ignore cars. I ignore cars because cars never get me there. Or else the cars will never grow me. I ignore the outside world. I realize that when I have a car, I only rent one. I never buy one. I realize that some people from the past, I realize they go and post on Facebook and they post an image of a car they bought for 40 grand. I realize you sold yourself into one area for the next 10 years because of that 40 grand that you gave for the car. Do you understand? You never do that because with that 40 grand, you can go around Italy, you can go around New Zealand, you can go around Jamaica, you can go around Africa with the 40 grand. In a sense, use your money wisely and go use your money to travel. I realize that's much more worth it than being in one spot. I realize that when you're speaking, you speak in a way that you're never ignorant. I ignore to be ignorant in my videos. I ignore anything that's going to be never loving toward me. I realize that when I have toxic people around me, I ignore them straight away. I just go somewhere else. I make sure I look at the habits first, I stay away from them. I ignore anything that's really hurting the environment. I ignore them. Do you understand? Because those people can never teach me anything. I realize I never ignore Jesus though. I never ignore Jesus. I realize I go where Jesus is because Jesus is something great. I realize Jesus is the greatest human alive today. I realize Jesus is still alive. You have to understand who Jesus is. You have to understand that I just go toward Jesus because Jesus can teach me better than anybody else. I realize that each and every time I learn from Jesus, I realize that I have a straight line up. I just go upwards. And that way I understand that when I ignore something, I ignore it for the common sense only. I realize I ignore what makes common sense. You understand? So I only make common sense, although you understand I ignore to ignore something that never makes common sense only. You understand? So that way I understand that I go around common sense people because when you're a common sense person, you'll be a smart ass. I ignore sarcastic people. I ignore people who joke around. I ignore entertainment. I ignore WWE wrestling. I used to grow up and watch WWE wrestling for 14 years. You have to understand that I was always tuning in every single Monday. You understand? So I ignore wrestling, I ignore all the sports that you watch on television, I ignore the UFC, I ignore every single TV show on the planet. I ignore all of them. I ignore all the chocolates in my life. I ignore that totally. I ignore all the ice cream. I ignore the ice cream totally. I ignore it totally. I ignore the soft drinks. I ignore it. Why? Because I get healthier. I become more energetic like that. I realize that when I'm a person who is doing better, I'm always ignoring something that's worse. I realize that I ignore anything that's never really going to lead me in a better way. I make sure that when I'm around life, I'm doing much better. So to be ignorant only is to ignore even the good side. I never need to ignore the good side, I need to ignore the bad side. I ignore what's evil. I ignore anybody who has criminal weapons or something like that. I ignore them. I just go somewhere else. I ignore the police. I don't have to be with the police anymore. I ignore them. I don't have to. I ignore approaching them. I ignore approaching people. I ignore approaching people. I never have to approach people in my life again. In a sense, so when I approach somebody, I just go and approach my mentors and my biological father and also my Jesus. In a sense, so I approach people who matter only. I ignore everybody else. In a sense, I ignore people who never care about me. I ignore those people totally. I realize that I go around and do much better. I ignore anything that tries to take my money away from me. I ignore that. I ignore it straight away. I realize that when they say, it's $20 to start my business, I ignore you totally now. I realize I never care about your business and your $20 business. You understand? I don't care about that. I ignore anybody who tries to take away my money. I ignore them straight away. You understand? So I go where the free money is. I go where the freedom is. I ignore anywhere where it's slavery. I ignore anything that's slave people. I ignore those people because those people cannot teach me. In a sense, so I go where people can teach me only. I look at the habits. I make sure I look at the habits first, and then I ignore people who I believe would never teach me anything. In a sense, so how do I understand that? I never know anything, or do I understand that I can just see who can teach me? I can see who can give me some information. I can see. I never know anything because to know something is to think about it. I never know. I can see the crowd. I can see what they're already saying about me. And same because I see something. I see the body language. I see the body language is saying something. I realize when somebody goes out to my poster and rips it off, I realize that person's negative. I promise you that person's dangerous. I promise you, although when I see the crowd, I see they're just walking past, I realize that's positive. You understand? I realize when somebody's getting my speaker and trying to rob me, I realize that's different. I realize that's negative. So make sure you give him the $92 speaker because that's what he's worth. Do you understand? I realize when they're stealing $92 speaker, I realize you give them the $92 speaker because they're worth $92 in life. Do you understand? So be a person who's really smart in life, and that way you understand to be ignorant of anything that's negative. Or else you never ignore yourself. You never ignore yourself. You never ignore people who are leading. You never ignore anything that's really going to be impactful in a negative way. I ignore sex. I ignore sex. I never need it in my life. I ignore it totally. I ignore masturbation. I ignore pornography. I ignore all of that. I ignore anything that's toxic. I ignore anything like dining in a restaurant. I ignore being in a restaurant. I ignore Subway. I ignore McDonald's. I ignore that totally. I never need it. I ignore Hungry Jack's. I never need Hungry Jack's in my life. I realize that I ignore advertisements. I ignore them, although these days I've been really around my mentors where there may be an advertisement. I make sure to go and just see who they are, and that's it. I just see who they are. I see the habits, and I see what they're promoting, and that's it. I realize that it's just when I'm watching mentors that I just go and look at the advertisements there. I realize when it's the same advertisement, I just move on. I ignore doing the same thing twice. Understand? Because each and every time I do it once, I learn from it. I do it once, I learn from it. Understand? I mean, when you're doing it twice, and you're doing it 3 times, and you're doing it 4 times, and you're doing it 1 million times, and you're doing the same thing 1 million times, you've never learned from it. I ignore never learning. You understand? I make sure I learn. I make sure I grow. I make sure that I ignore anything that's never going to get me here. I realize I have to be in reality. I ignore anything that's never going to enable me to take some more action today. I ignore anything that's, let's say, never my needs today. I only look at my needs today. What do I need today to go and achieve what I need? Much more. You understand? So your wants are something like hopes and dreams. Like you wish to win $1 million. I realize that it's a wish, although you have to understand that accommodation is a need today. So look at your needs. I promise you, that's much more important. I promise you, it's much more important to have a growth mindset than it is to have money. You understand? So they're a person who understands maturity. I ignore the immature people. I ignore the teenagers of life. I ignore them. I ignore them totally. You understand? Because guess what? When they got something to teach me, I'll go to them. I'll go to people when they got something to teach me. I promise you, when I never see an interesting person, I never go up to them. I never go up to them. I mean, they believe they're interesting. I never care how much they believe they're interesting because I see they can never teach me anything. You understand? So when I look at them, I must be able to see that they can teach me something. And then I go up to them. I go up to them. I ask them a question. How did you do this? What did you do over here? I ask them, totally. I ignore people who never promote me. I ignore people who never give me money. I ignore people who never love me. I realize that this world only has love. I realize that hate is love. Although there is negative love and there's also positive love. I ignore the negative love in life. I realize that I ignore other people to do it for me. I'm going to do it myself. I'm going to do it myself. I ignore anything that's never responsibility. I ignore people who are just down and out and old. I ignore people who are really, let's say, really old in life and they have nothing. I ignore those people. I ignore them because I still give them knowledge, although they're just very ignorant, those people. I ignore ignorant people. I ignore the know-it-alls of life. I ignore poor people. I realize that what distinguishes poor people and rich people is the skills acquired. I realize it's just skills. I realize that I was way poorer than this in my life. I realized that when I was a kid, in terms of, I'm still a kid, although I'm a baby now. I realized that when I was 17, for example, I was way poorer than I am now because of my knowledge and my wisdom. You understand? So I'll just be 1 second. I test. So I just went and made sure that I go and promote myself much better. So my poster fell on the floor and then I put it on the wall again. You understand that I ignore anything that's really never going to make me clean. So when I feel dirty, I ignore dirtiness and I avoid being an orgy mind or something like that. You have to understand that because of that, I am a much better person. I'm much cleaner, and that way you understand Jesus Christ. Because Jesus only had a clean mind and never a dirty mind. Do you understand? I realized that Jesus was never naughty. Do you understand? Because that's the definition of a human being. I realized that Jesus was never naughty. Do you understand? He never been naughty in life. I ignore naughtiness, anything to do with entertainment. I ignore comedy. I ignore that totally. I never have to be around those people. Do you understand? Because comedy never teaches me anything. I never liked entertainment. I never go around entertainment. I never like circus. I ignore the circus. Because guess what they do behind the scenes with the elephants? I mean, they whip them. I don't like that. I stay away from those people. You understand? I mean, they laugh at the elephant doing all that. You have to understand that the elephant is just trying to live. Whereas the elephant's trying to live, and the circus clown is hitting the elephant in order to do a trick for you. In a sense, I ignore those people who are unkind like that. I ignore chucking rubbish on the floor. I ignore that, so I never do it. You understand? I ignore something that's going to ruin the environment around me. I ignore eating animals. I ignore that because I'm a vegan. I ignore eating animals. You understand? Because I feel kinder that way. I feel that when I look at a snake, I need to pet the snake. I need to just be its friend. I love animals. I'm a vegan. You have to understand, when I ignore something like puberty and those people. I ignore them totally. I never need them around me. I ignore kids. Do you understand? Because guess what? I just go where the information is. Do you understand? I mean, kids, you have to understand that kids are beautiful. Although, guess what? Sooner or later, you have to go somewhere else. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to follow the kid around? You're going to follow the baby around? You have to understand, I ignore them. I mean, when they show up, I say hello, and that's it. I say hello in a way that I say, how are you today? In a sense, so I ignore babies. I realize I'm a baby. I ignore other people's babies. I ignore other people's families in life. I go where the family of somebody who's going to grow me only. I go around the families that grow. I ignore 99% of the crowd. I ignore people who are sheep. I ignore them totally. I don't care about them. You understand? Because I go and grow myself. I realize that most people never grow you. I realize that most people never have the courage to do what I do in life. I mean, most people will never have the courage to get on the microphone and do something. Do you understand? So realize that you go and do something. I ignore doing nothing. I mean, I ignore boredom. I ignore boredom in life. I never have to be around boring people. I ignore them too. I ignore boring people. I ignore nightclubs. I ignore them totally. I ignore picking up women. I ignore being around women. I ignore them totally. I ignore them. I ignore chasing women. I ignore chasing people. I ignore trying to be around people. You understand? I never try to be around people. I only be around people when I'm growing. Only. You understand? I ignore having to be with a group of boys. I ignore that. I used to be one of those people who was with the boys. I don't care about them. I realize that I ignore the boys now. I never ignore myself now. I realize that when I look at myself in the mirror, I ignore everybody else. I realize when I'm giving a video, I ignore everybody else. When I'm giving my video, I realize when I'm giving my video, I ignore everybody else that's walking around me. Do you understand? Because that's a tactic. I realize that what you ignore today is your self-discipline. I realize I'm doing so much behind the scenes, although you understand that what I ignore is my disciplines. I ignore every single area of the world right now because I'm in Brisbane. You understand? I ignore everybody else. I ignore everything else now so I can do my video. I ignore everything else in my life so I can do this video. You understand? I ignore everything else. I realize that what's important is my growth. I ignore anything that's never growth. I ignore replying to people online. I just ignore them. I ignore them totally. You understand? Because they waste my time. I realize they ask me, how are you? I don't know what that is. Do you understand? So realize that when you're a person who's always asking, how are you? I realize that you just go and mind your own business. You can see how the person is. You can see the habits already. Why are you asking, how are you? You understand? I mean, when I look better than yesterday inside my Instagram, why are you asking me, how am I? I mean, you can see how I am. I mean, what have you got to give me? I mean, I never am a person who relies on other people. I never rely on you to give me ideas, although I go and seek ideas. I need some ideas over here. I need some business techniques and some growth potential. I need some ideas. I mean, send me a quote or something. I mean, send me a quote from you that you made that you thought is so interesting. Do you understand? I need some collaboration. I stay away from people who have no collaboration and no business skills. I mean, when they say, what's a business? I stay away from those people. I ignore those people totally. I mean, when I ask them, do you have a business? And they say no, I stay away from them. I ignore those people. I never have to be around people who never have a purpose in life. I stay away from people who are depressed. I stay away from mental health people. I ignore mental health people. I ignore people who have no business skills. I ignore people who have nothing to give me. I never need them because those people are conditional minded. I ignore controlling people. I ignore being in jail. I've been to jail. I ignore being in jail now. I ignore hitting women. I've hit a woman in my life. Do you understand? I ignore hitting women. I ignore violence. I ignore hitting people. I realize it's never the way to go. I realize that even when you get hit and you hit back, I realize you hit somebody. I realize when a woman hits you and you're a man and you hit her back, I promise you they'll call you a woman basher for the rest of your life. Do you understand? So never hit a woman back even when she hits you 10 times. Do you understand? Because then you're a woman basher. I realize that you never cause violence. I stay away from violence. I stay away from anything that's going to hit anybody. I ignore hitting people. I ignore anything to do with the police. I ignore that. I ignore speeding cars because guess what? I never invest in cars. I invest in technology in terms of transport to get me from one way to another, although I never own a car. I used to own a car. I realized that I never bought the car in the first place. I realized that my biological dad bought me the car. I realized that is a nice, beautiful way to say, I'll give you everything. Although you have to understand that I started off traveling Australia with no car, and I've been without a car for 1 year and 1 month, and I've had a blast. You understand? You have to understand that I never appreciated the car that my biological dad got me because I was worse than yesterday. I realized I was a person becoming worse and worse over time. And then suddenly I came to a point where I started to become sober. And then that was 2 years ago. And here I am now, 6 years sober. You understand that I've been sober for 2 years after legal drugs now. Do you understand? So I stay away from legal drugs. I ignore the legal drugs. I ignore the pharmaceutical medications. I ignore the legal and illegal drugs of life. I ignore the poker games around town. I ignore the websites like adult sites and anything to do with dating sites and dating apps. I ignore all of that because that's all energy. I mean, what I ignore in life is energy. I mean, when I say I ignore McDonald's and dating apps, I mean, by the time you go on a dating app and set up your profile, I mean, that's 1 hour of your life. I ignore that, so I invest that 1 hour somewhere in a better place. I'm a trader. I'm a trader by nature. Although you understand that many people have the notion that you have to be a trader in the stock market. I ignore the stock market totally. I ignore Bitcoin. I ignore cryptocurrency. I never care about that in my life. I never care about that. I care about growth. I never rely on the stock market to make me money. I never rely on other people and anything outside of myself to make me money anymore. I ignore that totally. I ignore the stock market to make me money. I ignore cryptocurrency and Bitcoin mining to make me money because that's all a scam. I realized that I got scammed. I was a person scammed by that. I realized I ignore traders and people who go online on Instagram and message you that you give them $100 and they'll make you $50,000. I ignore those people. I realize they're scams. I realize that when somebody says, you give me some money and I'll make you some more money with that money, I realize that's a scam. I thank you very much. I thank you. I realize that when you're a person who understands that I ignore people who never wave. Do you understand? So when they never wave, I never will wave. I realize when they never talk to me, I never will talk to them. I realize when they're never inspired by me, I never am inspired by them. Do you understand? Because I look better than them and I'm doing better than yesterday and they're worse than yesterday and they're not inspired by me. I realize that they're stupid. I stay away from stupid people. I ignore stupid people. I ignore the politics of life. I ignore them totally. I ignore capitalism. I ignore Labour Party. I ignore all of that. I ignore the television. I ignore the news. I ignore the radio. Although I vote capitalism. I'd rather go the way of the richer. Do you understand? I realize that the poorer way is never to vote. I realize I go and vote for capitalism in life. I vote for the liberals in life. I'd rather go that way in life. You understand? So be a person who understands I never like politics, although I go for the liberals. I never like politics. I never care about the liberals. I never care about the Labour Party. I just vote the liberals because they choose and they make me have to vote. You understand? I never care about them. You have to understand that when I ignore people, I only ignore them when they ignore me. I mean, when I seek them out, I seek somebody who's more successful than the crowd. I mean, who's more standing out than the crowd? I'll go to those people. I'll go to those people who are far more successful and better looking in terms of status and attention and muscles, and they got something of value to give me in terms of information. I mean, when I look at a motivational speaker and the motivational speaker is saying, you must succeed, and when you succeed today, I shall say, I have a dream today, you must do something today to make sure you're a better life. I'll go to those people straight away. Because those people make me energetic. I'll go to those people. I'll go to those people because they've got something to teach me. You understand? I realize that Les Brown is one of them. I realize that Les Brown has become overweight because when he was 40 years of age, I realized that he was looking better than he is at 76 now. You have to understand that I don't know what happened. You have to understand though that what happened is inside and I'm never negative. I realized that either way, I realized that Les Brown is a motivational speaker. And when I look at Les Brown and the way his attitude is, I realized I love his attitude in terms of how he was. I realized today he still has the communication skills. I realized he's never lost the wisdom. I realized that what's amazing about him is that in life, you'll never lose your wisdom, although you understand that he never learned about nutrition. And that's why he's overweight. In a sense, so be that type of person who understands that I went overweight because I never learned about nutrition. And then guess what? I made the supermarket my university. And then I went into the supermarket every single day. And then I started to cook my own food. I started to cook my own food rather than having to give money for other people to cook my food. I then started to learn. I'm better than my words. I realized then I started to cook and learn each and every single day in the supermarket about what is good and what is not in terms of the labels, and I started to Google it. I started to learn about nutrition on Google, which is a dictionary today. I realized that the thesaurus and the dictionary, or I realized that the dictionary in terms of all the words, you can find them on Google. I realized your new dictionary is your phone. I mean, I realized that's amazing because 30 years ago, you'll find out in 1990, because I was just born into the technology ages. I just became born when the internet just arrived. You understand? I became born when the iPhone came out. You understand? I became born when Nintendo 64 became something. You understand? So realize that each and every time you do something, you ignore something that's never going to help you. You ignore people who are never motivational. Do you understand? I mean, if I was overweight today and I was motivational speaking, I'd still be doing it. I realize that nothing will stop me. You understand? So never be a person who's very down on your luck because of your habits. You have to understand, you have to live longer, you have to do something much better. You have to encourage yourself to lose weight. You have to encourage yourself to do everything much better. You have to realize that nobody else is going to encourage you, so you are your own life force. And I promise you that I ignore sex now because when I ignore sex, I have more energy. I have more energy when I ignore sex because women drain my... I realize that women drain me of everything when I have sex with them. Do you understand? So I stay away from sex, and that way I never drain myself of my fluid, which is my life force. I realize the more pleasure I have in life, I realize the more drained I feel. I stay away from pleasures. I ignore pleasures of life. I realize that I ignore anything that's pleasure. I realize when I ignore pleasure, I'm a person who's far better than yesterday. I'm always very vibrant. I realize that I've seen a nice photo where it's really a true story, although the truth is nice. You have to understand that this person is really muscular, and then there's another photo where the guy's looking like a junkie. You understand? And you have to understand the guy is like a skeletal in the other photo because guess what happened? He had a woman. You have to understand though that it's never the woman who made him drained. You understand? I realized that it's really that he had sex with a woman so much, and guess what? He became a skeleton. Do you understand? I mean, the guy became a skeleton because he was having so much sex. I realized what happened. I realized that he became pleasure. I realized that pleasure makes you a skeleton. I realized pleasure makes you on the homeless street path. I realized that when you're a person who's having so much pleasure, you go on the street like a homeless person. Do you understand? Because you'll find that people who are on the street are too much gratifying. I realize they're too much gratifying themselves. I realize they're gratification people. You understand? Because they're never doing anything. And you should understand, when I was so bored and I was a drug addict, I was always looking for drugs. I had no life. I had nothing of quality. I had nothing to give you. I was a person looking for 20 bucks from a biological dad to go and get a cigarette somewhere. You understand? So that's never the way to be. As I understand that I was a drug addict looking for some money to go and get myself some ice and to go get myself some cocaine. And guess what? I was a drug addict where I could never afford my own cocaine. I was that cheap. I was that poor. You understand? I was a drug addict where I would get 50 bucks from my biological dad and then 40 bucks would go to 2 pills. Do you understand? I was taking ecstasy pills. I mean, $20 for 1 pill. You understand? I was that kind of person. And guess where the $10 went? To McDonald's. I was that type of person. I'd put my $50 into 2 ecstasy pills and McDonald's. Do you understand? Because that's all I had. I was that kind of person. So stay away from that type of habit. That's a habit. Or that's a habit. So have better action in life. So I stay away from and I ignore ecstasy pills. I ignore anything to do with anything that's not good for me. And that way I understand that when I'm a person who is loving life, I'm doing something much better than yesterday. I'm always doing something to ignore other people when I understand that I'm doing something that's really of quality nature. You have to understand that when somebody's louder than you and somebody's speaking over you, I realize that they don't care about you, obviously, and guess what? You go your way. You just ignore them and that's it. You understand? So realize no matter what, when somebody catches your attention, it's because they're interesting and they're doing something. You understand? So you go around people who are doing something because they catch your attention. And richer better. I ignore those habits, like I've said, where I used to do any type of illegal drug, and I ignore asking people for money. In a sense, so I ignore conversation online, for example, because it's time consuming to talk to everybody else. I don't care about that because how much people do you have to talk to feel good? I mean, just talk to yourself all day long and you'll feel the best. Otherwise, it's a conversation with yourself that is the most important and never with other people in life. Otherwise, I don't care about other people. I care about the conversation that I have with myself every day to better myself, and then I'll better other people through my content. In a sense, so when people are interested in me, I'm then interested in them. In a sense, so you have to understand, I'm only interested in being a better person. I'm only interested in myself to become better. And that's it. I realize that when people never find that inspirational, I stay away from those people. I ignore those people who never find me I ignore those people who never find me as an inspiration. I ignore those people who are worse than their state. I realize that when I look at people, I label them 1 or 2. I realize when I look at a person, I say, that person's 1 because that person is better than their state. I realize when I look at number 2, I realize that I never go there. I realize that number 1 can teach me something. I realize number 2 can never teach me anything. I realize that is one of my schedules. So no matter what, I'm always looking at who is number 1 and who is number 2. You understand? Because the number 1 is better. I realize that number 1 is better than yesterday, and number 2 is worse than yesterday. So that is my beautiful schedule there, and that way I understand. I ignore anything of poor nature. I ignore poor people. I ignore anything that's very loud. So, for example, when I go to accommodation and there's always noise, I ignore that. I ignore the noise. I go somewhere where it's quiet. I'm much better. I ignore anywhere where, for example, there is always sex around me. I ignore those people. I go somewhere else. I live somewhere else. I ignore people having sex in my room, so I make sure no matter what, I get away from that. You understand? I realize that when you're in a hostel, you'll find that maybe someone is going to bring a woman into their bed where it's next to your bed, and they're going to have sex together while you're sleeping in the same room. I realize I ignore that. I totally go somewhere else. You understand? Because that's never fair on you. You understand? I mean, they're having sex, so I realize they're having just promiscuous sex in front of you. I realize I ignore that. I go somewhere else. You understand? I make sure to better my life anyway. And I ignore complaining. I ignore blaming people. I ignore asking people to do something for me. You understand? So I ignore anything to rely on the outside world for anything. I ignore anything of the outside world. I never ignore receiving money. I receive money when it's given. I make sure that I'm never making excuses, so I ignore making excuses. I ignore never getting healthier. I ignore never reading. I ignore never improving myself. So I'm always a person who is improving myself. I'm always a person who is reading. I'm always a person who's around entrepreneurs and mentors. I ignore never having mentors. I make sure to have mentors in life. I realize that way, I ignore anything that's going to disturb me. I ignore it. I'm rich or better. I have to understand that when you're disturbed, or you have a plastic bag, make sure that no matter what, it's never ever disturbing you. I realize that this plastic bag disturbs my ego. I realize that I never get disturbed. I realize when you get shaken in life, I realize that it's really your ego that's getting shaken. I realize that you have to overcome your ego to never feel like a victim. So I ignore victim mentality people because they're too egotistical. I ignore egotistical people. When I see an arrogant person, I ignore them. Totally. I just go somewhere else. I realize that when I have a street performance here, I realize that when somebody's negative around me, I ignore the person totally. I ignore somebody who's very negative around me. I realize that when they're trying to steal something off me, I ignore it totally. I just don't react. I ignore reacting to anything. Understand? I ignore reacting. I ignore attaching to people. I never have to attach to people. I never attach to anybody. I attach to something greater. I attach to communication skills only. I attach to what you can never see. I realize I attach to music and music listening. I realize I love music listening. I love also to speak much more and communicate in terms of you can hear my voice, although where is my voice going? I realize that's a spiritual world. I go to the spiritual world. I attach to the spiritual world. I attach to something that you can never see. I realize that the online world, you can never see the online world. I mean, where is the online world? I realize the online world is a spiritual world. I realize that when I upload this video online today, I realize it's going into the spiritual dimension. You understand? I realize the online world is here forever. You understand? I mean, something online is something that you can never see. I realize that my communication skills, you can hear, although where is it? I realize when you see it, I realize that communication skills are in the spiritual realm somewhere. Understand? So what you're saying today is coming from the spiritual realm. Understand? So I ignore anything that's less spiritual. I ignore anything that's less consciousness in life. I realize that when I have higher consciousness than somebody else, I ignore those people because I have higher consciousness. I mean, when you have higher consciousness, you're a smarter human being. You have to understand that when you're the smartest person in the room, you are in the wrong room. You have to understand that there's never a wrong nor right, although you understand that it's not about wrong nor right. You have to understand that when you're the smartest person in the room, you go somewhere alone and you be with yourself. You understand? Because why would you be around people who are lower consciousness than you and more stupid than you? Or else you go where higher consciousness is. You understand? So be a higher conscious person each and every day. You understand that, for example, that the subconscious mind is unconscious. So what that means, that is your ego. And you have a subconscious mind. And you have to become more aware every single day to overcome the subconscious mind. So your subconscious mind is on autopilot all the time. And you never have to get aware, although you understand that you have to. You understand? Because guess what? When you don't become aware, what is going to happen is your subconscious mind is going to take over. And it's going to be cruise control. I never need you on cruise control. I need you to make sure to drive your own way of life. I need you to maneuver your own way of life because otherwise your subconscious mind will do it. In a sense, so take over your subconscious mind and become 100% aware all the time. I mean, I need you to become more aware over time, and then you understand that your ego will become smaller and more. I mean, your ego is going to become smaller and smaller. So I ignore anything that's unaware. I mean, when I see habits, when I say that I look at habits, I look at people who are more conscious than me or less conscious. And when you're looking at more conscious people, I go towards the people who are giving far more than the rest of the crowd, because those people are more conscious. And the ones who are less conscious are the ones who have less habits and poor habits. So I go around the rich people who have better habits. I mean, the ones who are richer are the ones who have richer habits. And the richer habits mean richer consciousness. I go around people who have better quality of life and who can teach me a better quality of life and something around communication. I realize those people can teach me something. I realize anything to do with ignorance, and ignorance is a blessing when you're ignorant of negativity only. You understand? I mean, I study negativity, I study it, I'm never around negativity. I study everything about life. I realize that Jesus would study everything. I realize that Jesus would be there. I realize that Jesus would go to prison today and would make sure that each and every person there is free that's in the prison. I realize that each and every person that is in the prison and that is in the prison, I promise you Jesus would make them free. I realize they're freedom people. You understand? Because guess what? The people who are in the prison are unconscious about what they're doing. I realize they're like gorillas. And you have to understand, when you have a gorilla next to you, I promise you that gorilla can kill you. Do you understand? So that's why they're in jail. Or else they're behind bars. Do you understand? So realize they're like gorillas. Do you understand? So stay away from gorillas that are people who are human beings. Do you understand? So when you're a human being, you're a spiritual being. I realize when you're a person, you're just a human. You're not just a human, you're something much more than a human. You're a person who is a spiritual being in this planet. I mean, a being is a person who lives in the moment, and you understand that being is something that is spiritual and out of this dimension. You understand that music comes from the inside, or else that communication comes from the inside, and what's inside is a spiritual realm. In a sense, so every time I look inside, I'm a person who's more spiritual every single day, and that's why I write from the inside out, I talk from the inside out, I teach from the inside out. I do everything from the inside out. And I make sure to stay away from anything that takes my energy. I make sure I ignore everything that takes my energy. So anything that, for example, is a brothel or a escort or doing in-calls with escorts. So you can call an escort to come to your house and then you have to give her money. Do you understand? Or you have to give him money or whatever. I ignore escorts, I ignore brothels, I ignore anything to do with strippers. I never go to strip nightclubs. I never go there because I ignore it. I ignore it for a reason, because it never helps me. I realize that when you go to a stripper bar, you're going to be looking at strippers. And how is that going to help the next person? I don't know. When you go to a brothel, how is that going to help the next person? Why are you going to the brothel for? It's for your own self-interest. Do you understand? Because guess what? It's for your own seeking pleasure. Because you're seeking pleasure, or that's because you're seeking pleasure. Do you understand? So realize when you're a person who's calling escorts, I realize it's never because you're helping other people. I realize you have to go help other people more than doing anything that's got nothing to do with other people. understand? So when I do this, I realize this has got everything to do with other people because I'm growing myself. I'm growing in front of a crowd. I realize that when you're a person growing, you're a person never losing. You understand? I stay away from losers. I ignore losers in life. I ignore them. I ignore baseball games. I ignore NRL games. I ignore AFL games. I ignore soccer games. I ignore every single soccer sport match in the world. I don't care. I don't care about sport. I stay away from the World Series of Poker. I ignore the poker games all around the world on TV. I ignore any sports games around the world that is live on TV or live in person. I ignore dance recitals. I ignore jazz in a nightclub or somewhere like that. I love jazz music. I just never need to be in a nightclub where a person's drinking wine and looking. I don't need to be around those people. I don't need to be around that person. I don't know what that guy's going to teach me. I have to go around people who are teaching me something. I know people who never teach me anything. I ignore those people. I know people who say, you shut up and go over it. I stay away from those people. I stay away from people who make me look like a sheep. You understand? Because why did I even go there in the first place? You understand? Because I stay away from it. I ignore people who make me look small. I ignore those people. I ignore people who have 10 cousins around themselves and they look, I say that they make you look like the smallest one there. Do you understand? So I stay away from that. I stay away from the crowd and groups of people. I stay away from communities. I ignore communities, I ignore groups of people. I ignore anything to do with anybody that is a drug addict. I stay away from them. I stay away from anybody who looks poor image. I ignore poor image people. Do you understand? Because it never makes sense for me to be around those people. I realize that I gave you so many ignorance in terms of life where I am never ignorant, although I'm staying away from most of the aspects of life, and that's why I'm ignorant about most aspects of life that never helped me. Do you understand? I'm ignorant where it makes common sense. Do you understand? So when I find these skills, I always have to look for those ideas, and I have to make sure that it's all energy. I mean, when you go to a brothel, and by the time you go there, I realize it's going to take you 3 hours to get there and back. You understand? So by the time you're there and you're having sex and then you go backwards, I realize that 3 hours you could have done something to make a 3-hour video with content that's going to help somebody. And guess what? You went to the brothel and you had self-seeking pleasures, and guess what? That person took you $500. I realize they took you $500 and they never loved you while you're having sex. You understand? I realize I ignore people who never love me. I ignore anything that is never healthy. I realize I ignore anything that is never going to teach me. So I make sure when I look at information, I never ignore that. I thank you. I never ignore information. I never ignore information. I make sure when I see information, I read it. I scan the information. I realize that when I scan the information, I only scan what's interesting. I realize that when you look at a book, I realize you never read the book from start to finish. You go and read the table of contents, and then you go to the most interesting part. You understand? I realize I ignore investing in self-education in terms of ebooks only. I never read ebooks. I don't care about ebooks. You understand? I have ebooks. I have my PDFs in terms of my journals. I promise you that's all ebooks. I promise you my quotes are ebooks. I also never read ebooks. I never care about reading physically. I ignore physical reading in terms of having to look at the words to read it. I realize although sometimes I have to. I just ignore ebooks. I ignore ebooks. I never go there. I realize I get the audiobook. I listen on the go. I watch the YouTube videos. I realize that I love audiobooks. I realize that I make sure no matter what, I ignore writing books because I write the books in my journal. Alright, I realize that each and every time I have something to write, I write in my journal because that's my book. I realize my journal for the next 73 years, I have 26,000 journals of every single day. And guess what? I realize that's a massive book. I realize that 26,000 journals have 9 pages each. I realize that's a lot of pages. You understand that it's a lot of words. I ignore anything that's never writing. I'm Richard Better. I ignore anybody that's really psychotic. I ignore those people. I ignore schizophrenic people. I ignore anybody in a rehab. I ignore those people. I ignore anybody that is a slave. I ignore those people. I realize that when people have money, I don't even care about their money. I care about what can they teach me. I care about what can they teach me. I'll give them some money when they can teach me something. In a sense, so I ignore pricing myself in my books and my content. I never care about that. I never care about pricing my video for $100. I'm never working for $100. I'm working for something for free. I'm working for free. I never price myself because I work for free. You understand? I work for freedom. As soon as you label yourself a price, you're in the game of chasing money. I ignore chasing money. I ignore chasing anything in life. I ignore most people on the planet. I ignore everything in terms of that's not good for me. I ignore 99% of life. I realize I stick where the 1% of life is. I never go where 9% of life is. I go where 1% of life is. I'll go the road less followed. I'll go and do something that's never been done before. I realize that I'm the only Croatian and Serbian vegan in the world that's a public speaker. I realize that no matter what, although in my own name, I realize I'm a unique person. I realize that nobody else is me. In a sense, so I realize that a Croatian and Serbian vegan, I've never met one outside of me. In a sense, so guess what? I never care about them. I realize that I ignore other people outside of me, although I just make sure to reply and contact those who contact me. I realize I never call anybody other than my biological father. Do you understand? I realize I only call my biological father because he's the second of kin who's helped me the second most in terms of my life. I mean, the guy's given me so much in terms of material aspects of life, and he's given me freedom of speech and choice and a lot of aspects of life in terms of accommodation for free, and has given me money so much. So I contact him because he's worthy of my attention. I realize he's worthy of my attention. I realize that no matter what, that he's getting older, although you have to understand that he's getting older. I'm getting younger throughout time. And what's the difference? I promise you that he is ignorant of anything that's good, more and more. I realize that although my biological dad is good, to a certain extent, you understand that he's a person who ignores rich habits. I realize that I never ignore rich habits, I ignore poor habits, I ignore my dad's habits. I realize I ignore my biological dad's habits. I'm my dad, I'm my mum, I'm my cousin, I'm everything in my life. You understand though, that I ignore anything that's never Jesus Christ. I ignore anything that's never going towards Jesus. I realize when I link Jesus with that person, I realize that Jesus will say, you stay away from that person, or you go to that person. I realize that anybody who's got more attention is where you need to go. I realize though, that some people who have more attention can never help you. I realize that some people, I will never mention names, although you understand that most people who have attention can never help you in any manner. You understand they got attention because of the drama. I realize they got attention because of something they've done in terms of drama and that is never teaching you. I realize they're comedy people or something like that. Understand? So you have to realize that the world is more shifting into drama today because they're too much tuned into the outside world, and I ignore the outside world and what's happening. I ignore Twitter, I ignore every single social media on the planet except for Instagram. I mean, that's how simple I am. I realize that when I promote myself, I just promote one Instagram. I realize I ignore everything else. You understand? I ignore everything else in terms of social media, although I never ignore myself. I never ignore something greater than me. I ignore anything that's never greater. I ignore anything that's never growing. I mean, when I look at people, I either see a dead tree or I see a lemon tree. I realize that's the number one or number two. I realize that I'm a person who understands that when I look at Djokovic, I look at number one. You understand? Because that guy is better than yesterday. I look at Arnold Schwarzenegger, I see number one. I realize that guy's better than yesterday. I look at Sylvester Stallone, I see number one. Whereas when I look at a fat person, I see number two. I see that person's worse than yesterday. I stay away from that person because that person's more arrogant. I promise you, that person, when I come up to him and I say, would you like to lose some weight, sir? I realize that guy's going to attack me. I realize that person's going to attack me really quickly. I realize that I happen to do that in Cairns and one person attacked me, although you understand they had a daughter next to him, and then I just said, I thank you very much, and I just left. Although you understand, I never became a victim. I realize that when you become a victim, I realize it's because you're too materialistic, so I ignore anything that's material in the planet. I ignore anything that is going to steal in life or anything in terms of criminality. I ignore the justice system. I ignore them totally. I read the information, although I ignore them as people. You understand? I never need to be around justice people. I never need to be around lawyers. I never need to be around plumbers and mechanics. I don't care about them. I ignore the mechanics of the world, I ignore the plumbers, I ignore the apprentice of the world, I ignore the people who are never business people who can never teach me anything. I realize that just because you're a mechanic doesn't mean you can teach me anything. You understand? I realize that you have to understand that not everybody can teach you something. I realize that you have to go and grow anyway. You have to understand you go where you can be taught. I realize that somebody can teach you something, although you understand that most of the time, no. I realize that when somebody's about to teach you something, I realize they're teaching you already. I understand that I ignore people who never teach me anything. I realize that anybody that can never teach me anything, I stay away from them. I stay away from 9 to 5 people because most of them never teach anything. I realize that anything that's in a 9 to 5, I ignore it totally. I don't care what job it is. The best I can do in a 9 to 5 job is a waiter. I realize that it's a nice, beautiful restaurant, although you understand that it's just never my type of line of work. I realize that communication is my type of work. I realize that being out of 9 to 5 is my type of work. I realize I've got a passion. I ignore jogging. I ignore jogging like these two. I ignore that. I never jog like them. I jog in the spot. I jog 20 meters, from 20 meters, from 20 meters, from 20 meters. You understand? I just jog in one little spot. I never jog 10 kilometers that way and 10 kilometers backwards. I realize that's going to kill me. You understand? I realize I don't know what you're trying to do. I realize that you go and jog on the spot. I promise you, that's the best athleticism. I enjoy myself, although you understand that in this video I gave you so much in terms of how to ignore. You understand that because I've told you what to ignore and I've shown you what I've ignored in my life and what I still ignore today, you understand how to better yourself, and it's really how you see my journal in my life, and you understand what you never do is also how to ignore. And I ignore so much stuff, and when I point in terms of, I put bullet points, I may write something like, that I do in terms of I stay away from it, and then you understand that I may say McDonald's. I may put a bullet point with McDonald's just there. I realize that is what I stay away from because it's a bullet point. So when you look at bullet points in my journal, you'll find what I stay away from. And it's just a nice, beautiful way to say you guys have to do the same. You understand? So I have over 100,000 ways on how to ignore life. And that's like Thomas Edison, on how Thomas Edison found 1,000 ways that the light bulb will never work. You understand? Because he ignores 1,000 ways in which the light bulb will never work. So I ignore over 100,000 ways to never live life. Do you understand? So I make sure to never live 1,000 ways of life because I found better ways. You understand? I ignore 1,000 ways to live life. You understand? Because those are the ways that never work in terms of my life and my schedule, which is growth. You understand? So if you need growth, you'll also do the same in my journal and as I did, so that you can have a better lifestyle and you can understand what time management is and financial calendar, which is your financial statement. Although guys, I have another course coming up, and you understand that no matter what, you guys enjoy your day, and just make sure that you go and share this around and you be a person who's great in this day.